Bismillah wa alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the King, the Master, the Sustainer, the Creator of the seven heavens and the earth, who sent peace and blessings upon His beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My brothers, the very famous Imam al-Nawawi, the Shafi'i scholar, who put together the very famous Riyadh al-Salihin, he starts off his book with a very unique chapter. In fact, Imam al-Bukhari also starts his Sahih Hadith collection also with a very famous hadith. And the same hadith is the same hadith that Imam al-Nawawi started off his first chapter with. It's also the same hadith he started off his very famous, the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. My brothers, this hadith that I'm about to share with you, and trust me, I'm not going to share anything new, you all know the hadith, is very unique for the believer, and it's important you understand why it's unique and why is it important. My brothers, Imam al-Nawawi in his Riyadh al-Salihin, he put together chapters. Imagine this book is a collection of Sahih Hadith and ayat of Quran, and he put them together in chapters, right? And many books were written about this famous book. In fact, some of the scholars even write, and why did Imam al-Nawawi put the chapters in the order that he put them in? Like, I'll give you an example. If you and I now decided that, Shabab, we're going to write a book about deen, we're going to write a book about Islam, what do you think should be the first chapter? I'm sure most of us here, the majority of us will say, well, if we're going to speak about deen and Islam, start by speaking about Allah, speak about Tawheed, speak about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, speak about Salah, Siyam, charity, Jihad, obviously something big. But Imam al-Nawawi didn't start the book with any of this. Rather, he started his book with the chapter of what? Sincerity. But why? Why did he start with sincerity? And why is this important for us today? Because there's no point talking about any other topic in deen if sincerity is not there. What good is your salah? What good is your jihad? What good is your fasting? What good is your charity if the sincerity is not there? If sincerity is not there, no matter what you do, it equals to nothing in the eyes of Allah. So the very famous hadith that was narrated by Umar ibn al-Khattab, and I'm sure you all know it, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that verily all actions in the eyes of Allah are according to the intention that was behind it. Why is this hadith so famous and why is it so important? My brothers, for the Sahaba, and please, today I want you to try and think like a Sahabi. Don't think like now, most of you thinking about that nephew waiting back home. I know. But let's just try, ma'alash, we watch Aflam Hindi or Turkey and we always imagine to be the hero and the superstar, yes or no? Today, let's try and imagine ourselves and try to think like a Sahabi, like a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My brothers, for the Sahaba, believe it or not, the greatest sacrifice that the Sahaba did in their eyes, the greatest sacrifice that was ever put forward for Allah was the migration from Mecca to Medina. For Sahaba, this was number one. Anything that came after the Hijrah was number 2, 3, and 4, and he just had to follow. So now I want you to imagine you're a Sahabi. And these people who took the migration from Mecca to Medina, they took the biggest sacrifice you could ever do. And one Sahabi performed the greatest, one Sahabi, he did the greatest action you could ever do. He left his home in Mecca and migrated from Mecca to Medina. But when he reaches Medina, he gets to Medina, and more or less the Prophet of Allah, they get there and they get together. He's thinking in his heart, wow, I did the greatest sacrifice. And yet the Prophet of Allah gathers the companions and gives them a hadith. Ulama say about this one hadith that was narrated by Umar ibn al-Khattab, it is 1/3 of all of our Sharia is this one hadith. 1/3 of the Islamic Sharia is because of this one hadith. So the Prophet of Allah grabs the companions and he says to them, he says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that listen boys, I'm using modern term language, that listen boys, everything you do in the eyes of Allah is according to the intention that was behind it. So whosoever migrated for Allah and His Prophet, then know that your migration is for Allah and His Prophet. Imagine you're this Sahabi and you're sitting there and you're listening to these words. And then he says, but whosoever of you migrated for some worldly benefits or for a woman to marry, you see this man, he was engaged to a woman in Medina. So when the time for migration came, Like you and I say today, what? Yallah, asfurana bhajara, 2 birds with 1 stone. The man had a fiancée in Medina, and it happened to be that there was a migration, so it worked out well for him. He was going to Medina anyway. So he did the greatest action you could ever do, but his intention was not there. So the Prophet of Allah more or less is telling him, everything that you did equals to a big fat 0 in the eyes of Allah. Not only was it a big fat 0, this is for me like the salt to the wound. Not only is there a big fat 0, but the Prophet of Allah came to know about it, mentioned it in front of the companions, and is now narrated in the most famous hadith that would be mentioned to the Day of Judgment. Imagine this man is thinking, my story will be mentioned to the Day of Judgment. What crime did I do? But Rasulullah is teaching the Ummah that don't get caught up with the action that you do. You should always monitor the action that is behind it. My brothers, wallahi, why is this important? And why am I giving this reminder in the month of Ramadan? Why? My brother, you can build 1,000 hospitals. You can build 1,000 hospitals and build 1,000 masajid and do 1,000 great things in the name of Allah. But you had an intention in your heart other than the pleasure of Allah. You're going to stand before Allah with the biggest shock of your life. Because my brothers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a jealous God. This word sometimes for us is, what do you mean he's jealous? And how can you speak about Allah like this? And Allah is a jealous God. And if Allah sees in your heart that there is something other than Him, it doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how people love it. If Allah sees that there's something in your heart other than Him, He walks away. Allah's not interested. So one of you might say, يا أخي, come on now, Allah تخنت ترى ما حدا ربي لي دان وربي لي شوية كرش بده يجي يفسر لي بالدين. Come on man, what do you mean? But I tell you, listen, let's try to live this example together, yeah? I want you to imagine now, any one of you now, after the salah, you go to the hulu shop now, you buy some trefe, you buy some roses, you buy some chocolates, you go to the house, بتظبط حالك, بتمشط لي الشعرات, بتحط شوية عطر, you fix the abaya up, you send it to the kids, you grab the kids, you send them to the neighbor, to back door, to the front, in the car, send them off to your parents, you just got rid of the kids. Halas, you're feeling romantic, you want to go home, you want to impress the missus. So you come to the door and you run up to the door, جالك بيجي عطيري boom, you knock it over and إجا يعني فاد روميو. So you come in, you walk inside, you come to the missus, you turn on the candles, you put the boys to men on, you come to the missus and you sit next to her. قلبي روحي عيني. أنت يا قمر وأنت يا ما بعرف شو خذ بقى قصص وحكايات. And then you look at your wife and you tell her, Wallahi, I love you. Wallahi, I love you with all my heart. Then imagine she turns around to you and she says to you, and Wallahi, I love you too. Wallahi, I love you with 99% of my heart. But سامحني, I have 1% for the neighbor next door. شو هي neighbor next door? أي neighbor هذا next door that has 1% of your heart. والله لا يذبح يذبح we bury together and we pray janazah on the both of you together. You as a human being, really you be reasonable. As a human being, would you accept from your wife that she tells you 99% of my heart is for you, but there's 1%, just 1% is for the neighbor next door? Would you accept it? Talk to me. Would you accept it? But how about when Allah sees in your heart that you're doing an action for something other than Him? Hasha lillah, of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above any example that we can give. But when Allah sees in your heart that you're seeking the pleasure and the desire of someone other than Him, Allah walks away. And wallahi, my brothers, there was no one that was more conscious of their sincerity. There was nobody that was more watchful of their actions than the Sahaba. What made these people so special and so unique, my brothers? Why do you do what you do, my brother? Why? Do you fast because everyone else fasts? Do you come to Taraweeh simply because, well, that's what everyone else does? Or is there an intention behind it? Are you seeking Allah's pleasure, my brother? والله أعوذ بالله من كلمة أنا. Don't you love this one? أعوذ بالله من كلمة أنا بس والله حجانا 3 مرات. شو يعني إذا حجات 3 مرات يعني؟ طب مين عم بتسمع؟ Who are you telling that you've been to Hajj 3 times يعني? And really, who is so interested in how many times you've been to Hajj? And why are you boasting that you've been there 3 times? Sometimes, my brother, with a word you destroy 3 Hajj trips. That's 3 years of Hajj and over $30,000 in money going and coming back. You destroyed them with 1 word that came out of your mouth. You do what you do seeking the pleasure of Allah only, my brothers. Only. That's the only reason we do anything. Why? Because we're seeking Allah's pleasure. And you should be conscious of your heart all the time. One of the 7 that will be under the throne of Allah on a day when there is no shade except His shade is who? The Prophet of Allah, he says, the man whose left hand doesn't know what his right hand gave in charity. It was in secret. It was between him and Allah. So my brothers, I'm going to wrap up. Why is this important? Always renew your intention. And before you do any action in deen, ask yourself, why am I doing this? One of the scholars, he says, whenever someone used to knock my door, imagine, the scholar says, whenever someone would knock my door, from the time I got up to the time I went to open it, I would have made 70 different intentions in my heart. So always renew your intention, my brothers. Sometimes you could do a very small action, but if you couple it with a large intention, then it's become beautified. And the opposite is true. You could do the greatest action, but a very small intention or nothing altogether, it becomes 0 in the eyes of Allah. So please, my brothers, always renew your intention and always be conscious about this. Now, two things before I end. Shaitan has already come to you like a sheikh, a mufti with a big amama and said to you, did you hear what the brother said? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. You've been doing this great action for a long time. Now you notice there's a problem with your intention. So what does he advise you with? Leave the action. No, the scholars say no. The scholars say if you're doing a good action with a corrupted intention, keep doing the action and work on the intention. And the last thing, my brothers, is whenever you come to do something, beautify it with intentions. I'm sure many of you here, you pay rent. I pay rent. Every week when you come to pay your landlord, before you come to pay him, renew your intention. Say, Allah, I give you this in charity. Ya Allah, this is to stay away from haram. Ya Allah, this is to stay away from riba. Then every dollar that you give has become what? Become sadaqah. You're filling up petrol in the car, you say, Ya Allah, I'm intending all of this fuel, I'm going to spend it in your sake, taking my children to school and going to the masjid. Then every single liter that goes into your tank, you get rewarded for. You come to go to sleep, before you go to sleep, you do your afkar, you make your wudu, and you make niyyah, Ya Allah, I'm going to sleep so that I can wake up in the morning and worship you. Every minute that you're sleeping, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for, and I'm sure you catch my drift. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.